Just to reintroduce myself again, I'm Mike Enright with Rio Tinto, Australasia region. I have a habit of talking quite quickly, so go like that if I get a bit carried away. First, I'd just like to thank IAGSA and Artex for the opportunity to talk to you guys today. I'll quickly put in an apology for the inconsistency between my slides. I kind of borrowed my slides from other people who diligently put them together. Theo did his best to make it look slick. I just want to clarify too, this is a sort of perspective of Rio Tinto Exploration Australasia region. I'm not really speaking on behalf of the business groups or the other regions. It's really focusing on our region. And I find it interesting that I'm here because I offered to present to Lance, and I threw him across a presentation that I use internally a bit. And at that point, I didn't know about the Navajo that had gone down. And of course, Lance was pretty enthusiastic for me to share. So this talk's really about Rio Tinto Exploration perspective on daily flight monitoring and how we try and use that to influence pilot behaviour. Right, there you go. So there's a quick outline. We'll start with the incident that started us on the journey. Along the way, I'll review some of the incidents that we've had, near misses, how it fits in with IAGSA's expectations, a few of my own personal comments, what it means when you work for RTX AAR, Australasia region, and moving forward, what I'd like to see happen, or in the directions that I think are important. So this is really the one. It's already been shared, I believe, in Toronto. So I'm not going to go on it for long. But this sort of started for us. It was a fixed wing survey in Queensland. A farmer complained, and we thought he was not telling the truth. We went out, and sure enough, he'd injured his calf. And we asked to get the tracking information, and realised that the pilot was flying low, over 5 kilometres away, and the notifications hadn't gone out that far to warn to engage with the community. I'll admit it occurred partly because we were trying to keep all the farmers happy and we're jumping from different parts of the block, so we had overcomplicated it for the pilot. It ended up we had to cancel half that job because of community relations, and there was a financial impact. We've never actually gone back and completed that job. But really, it gets better. So when we asked to get all of the flight information for that job, we suddenly realised that if I can work out that one, this down here is down at survey height. 30 kilometres out, the pilot got down and was zooming in. From my memory, this happened a while ago, there's a highway here, I think there's a railway line, and I think there's a power line as well, all running through there. And so, both the company involved, the service provider, and us, we had to have a really good think about this. And he was just comfortable. He was an ag pilot. He was very comfortable down there. He wasn't doing it to break rules or anything. He was just very comfortable flying at that height. And so that started Rio on the journey to start monitoring all flights from takeoff to landing. You guys can read the rest. Lance provided me the context for IAGSA, where it would fit into IAGSA, this talk. There's a component about climbing for safe manoeuvring on transits, and within the CFIT area for transit, there's the performance monitoring side of it, just to put that into context, about monitoring your flight surveys, and I think the word they use is as early as possible. So early as possible to me is, well, if they've done it one day and you can find out about it before the next day and provide them feedback, that's logical where it fits in from my perspective, rather than at the end of the job or the end of the week, or why not? It's right there. The information's available. So this was another one happening the same year. This was within a business group. I think this is also a share within IAGSA, so I don't need to go on about this one too much, but it's relevant, so I've done it. A little bit confusing because I've zoomed in, but both...
Mike, please do, because some people will not know.
Yeah, I'm going to go. So I think this was the first line of the survey, and then sort of they flew around and around here, and then flew back in here. Went in to go on to the second line, and at that point, the loop, it was a slung load, clipped a tree. It was an 8 metre high tree, and then well, actually went around again, and then went around again, and then he clipped the tree. Sorry. So there was points here where obviously the pilot's distracted. He couldn't get the he was unfamiliar with the navigation screen. He hadn't used it for a while. Professional pilot moving between different companies, different navigation screens, and he'd just sort of forgotten how to move that one to navigate within that screen. And he was obviously distracted by it and getting quite low as he's doing that, and to the point where he actually came right down at the start of the line and clipped a tree. No one was hurt. The equipment took a hit, and I think from that we really learned that question we always say now to the pilots when they start: when was the last time you used this screen? When was the last time you used this helicopter? When was it? Not so much what your hours are, but what's your frequency on this setup? And that was really a learning from us. Moving forward, in 2013, different service provider, different pilots. On this one, it was they actually had a navigator in the helicopter, and they got a bit distracted trying to navigate onto the line and where they were. They, after taking off from refuelling, we had set up a buffer area for community. It said, want you to go into that area. It had all been discussed. They had it in their system. They have a screen that shows that. Yet they still managed to drift into it by being distracted, and they also drift into it at quite low altitudes. There's nothing slung on this. That's the height of the actual helicopter there when they went into the buffer area. I think this one's not so much about flying low. It's just more about the challenges of setting buffer areas and then pilots actually being able to achieve what you're hoping to achieve. They had no idea, of course, that they'd done it. I mean, it's not a big deal because it was pastoralist. If it had been a country border, an unfriendly country, perhaps they would have taken more notice, but also there's no visual marker down there for the pilot. So if there's no visual marker, like a river or a road, then it's really, from experience, it's really hard for them to be looking at navigation screens and to ensure that they don't go into buffer areas. Number 3, still in 2013, different company again, different pilot. This was a challenging job because of the amount of infrastructure around, and we set up buffers, all discussed, and on transit, moving, so I've got to give some context. So they come offline here, they know they had to get over to here somewhere. On coming off, they notice that there's buildings, so they move their way around the buildings. At this point, they realise there's a pit, so they move away from the pit and come onto line. But, from my perspective, at no point did they climb to height. I would like to see those numbers being at least 300 metres above the ground for the entire loop, everything. We had discussed it with the pilot beforehand, and he was just very comfortable. He got up a bit, and he was pretty happy with where he was. He knew that he had other things to worry about. So with other things to worry about, then I really would have liked to see him get up to height. I think, if we just thought about it a bit before, or the person setting the lines today, if they'd flown it the other direction, so instead of going this way, they'd gone that way and up, we wouldn't have even created this issue where he even had to fly in this area. So just by redesigning the lines that we did that day, we could have, and at some point we set the pilot up for failure, or made it more likely. So I know that's quite hard. From day to day, you have to leave the pilot some discretion which lines they're going to do. But if we thought about it a bit more, then we could have removed this exposure, I suppose is what you'd call it. Okay, now moving forward to 2017. Different company, different pilot. A slung load one. And, moving from one side of the survey area over here, over to here. Quite a large area. Amazing pilot, isn't he? I mean, look at how consistent he's flying and how straight he's flying. But just quite happy. The pre-start, we go through this. We talk about this presentation is formed to go through the pilots with and to show what we want. So he is aware of our expectations, and he's just very comfortable flying at that height outside the area. This one you'd assume would have been covered within the risk assessment, so he wasn't flying outside an area that hadn't been reviewed, the JSA. Some positives. The company knew what our expectations were, and I think before it even landed, they'd come in over and talked to us and said, this has happened. The terrain was very benign out here, no infrastructure, so it really is a lower risk incident. But once again, it should have shown to me that he's very happy flying at that height. And in fact, this is what's in our, that's what's in our JSA. That goes into all of them. That gets discussed at the preliminary meeting. It gets discussed by the pilot before we start. Yet, it still seems to occur. So, first off, I just want to comment saying that all these helicopter pilots I consider out-and-out professionals. I'd have them back on all of my jobs. I think, they are really, people take their job very seriously. When you provide them feedback in a professional way, they're all very responsive to the feedback. I don't think, if we just talk to them and ask them about, how that's going and can you get up and give them continual feedback in a dignified way, they're all happy to hear it. So they want to do the best job and they want to do it as best they can. So it's just not about the quality of the people we have. I think it's more about the fact that they've become somewhat desensitised to the risks when you're in the wireline environment. They spend their days in there. They're very good at what they do. And it's not their first reaction when a navigation screen plays up or they've got to transit 6 Ks to the next area to pull up, get out of the danger zone, move to the next area and then go down and only be there when they need to. So why I'm presenting this is that we've got the movers and the shakers in the room here, and I think we could all work together to influence pilot behaviour and reiterate that we want to minimise their time down in the wireline environment. I've just put a couple of other notes there about the buffers, which I've mentioned, is that I don't know that we're doing buffers as well as we can. I think buffers are going to be more and more important as community expectations and engagement is only going to increase. They need to find a way to get them into the navigation screens that are easy for the pilots. The more complex we make it for the pilots, the more chance they're just going to be distracted from what they need to be doing, which is looking outside the screen. So I think we do have to reassess what the future of navigation screens look like, what's going to be needed on them, how do we make it as easy as possible for these pilots to achieve what we want to achieve. And I know everyone's got their own navigation screens and it's just a challenge to say that, but maybe we can set what best practice looks like, what we'd like to see, and then let the service providers head for that. I'll probably rush through it again. I'm going to catch up that time that we're behind. So what does it mean when you work for us? Working with RTX, Rio Tinto Exploration Australia region, we like to have a meeting that takes as long as it takes, sometimes a day, where we get all the important people in the room together. We try to fly people in if we can. We try to get the chief pilot, the ops manager. We have an independent aviation person there to provide context, and we have our safety advisor there, and we just talk through the JSA and make sure everyone's on the same page, that we're all aligned. We talk about what's needed for Rio Tinto's aviation requirements, C7, and where that fits in and how that's going to impact it. And it's great to have the chief pilot there to to clarify what is realistically can be done and to agree to it. So that's integral. We always do that. Then on site, before we start, I go through bits of this presentation with the pilots or any flight crew to sort of say, well, this is what's happened with us, this is what we want to avoid. We get the pilot to actually talk us through the JSA, and then we know he's at least read it once, and make sure he understands it and it can clarify it to us so it's all clear. And then we focus in on what's different from their day-to-day job for working for us. So, what goes above and beyond Rio Tinto's requirements that are normal to just IAGSA requirements. And that takes a few hours. We always do an emergency response. I didn't put that up there, but we always test all our telephone numbers, do a scenario where we see what we think is going to happen actually happens. Perhaps when they go out and do the recon, if they're going to go refuel, we just put it in at that time, or some way of ensuring that what we think is going to happen actually happens. We talked about the recent on navigation screens. If they're not, we get them to practice the screen up at height where it's safer until they're happy at our costs. We try to pick areas that are benign to start the survey, benign either by topography or culture, so the pilot can just ease his way into it. If they come back from a decent break, we try to keep some of that area for them to work on. Or a new pilot coming in once again. So we kind of try and ease them into it. Some of them have come from extreme topography, and all of ours is quite flat, but we try and start them on the easiest area. We're very open to more reconnaissance flights, especially if they're large areas or complex. We're happy to pay for that, so that they just do packets of recon. That's enough for them to sort of get their eye in, and as we move through a bigger area or wider line space, that they're sure they're happy with it. If they want more reconnaissance flights, then we're highly encouraging of that. And of course, what we've talked about here is the tracking. So we get all the tracking data. We look at it against heights, where they've actually flown, and speeds. And we have hard lines in our contracts where we ask the chief pilot to work with us on what is the minimum height going to be for this job, where we call it an incident. And then we put it in there. So, and then we try and guide people before they've got to that point. So with the guidance of the service provider, we say, well, what is realistically too low? And then we put that in there and say, right, that is what's going to be an incident. And then we communicate with the pilot as he's getting towards that to avoid them getting to that point. And if they do have it, then it's just on the ground, let's sit down, let's review our controls, what are we going to change so that we don't have another one of them. If we need to, we'll raise the height. If that's all we've got to work with, then those decisions have to be made. So, it'd be great if the service providers were doing all that themselves and then coming to us and telling us, right, this is what's happened, this is what we're going to do, this is what we want to change, what's your views on it? At the moment, we drive it, but we'd be more than happy to be managed, if you like. And we're out there daily, and we're trying to provide feedback to the pilot on how they're flying. And if you do it in a professional way, actually, they quite like it that someone's actually paying attention and actually cares. So, I mean, I've probably gone well short of time, but this is my final slide. So, I put the Navajo up there because Lance sort of pointed out to me. I wasn't aware of it before I offered. I'm definitely one of those people who's a believer that best practices achieved when the service providers drive it rather than the other way around. You guys know your business better. I'd love it in the future if it wasn't us doing that monitoring and it was actually a part of the service that came from service providers. That maybe that's an IAGSA initiative where you can put your polygons of your buffers, and you can put your minimum speeds, and you can put heights, and then all the data for the day just goes in and spits you out a report, which you can just hand to the client if they want it. Maybe it's a KMZ. I know some are doing some of this stuff, so it's not no total shock, but it's easy. It should be automated. It shouldn't need to be too manual. I wouldn't have thought. With a bit of thought, you could probably put something together. and make it much easier to be done, and it could be done by the end of the flight. You could have it within half an hour of you putting the data in, and you can have it to the client, and if there's a problem you can discuss it with the pilot probably that night or the next morning. So that would be great. Now I was being a bit cheeky here. I've already put in there that's what I want, a heads-up display, but I don't necessarily want that. I throw that one out there as a comment piece, as what are people already trialling them? Has anyone trialled a heads-up display for pilots? Is it something that chief pilots support or would be dead against? I don't have any of those answers. I do know that I think that what the pilots have at their disposal at the moment with the modern technologies could be a lot better, and I think that's an area that the industry needs to improve on. And also, I think it has to include visual and audio alerts. It's very hit and miss as we work with the different service providers, how they alert their pilots that they've got too low, and some of it works, some of them are a little bit resistant to it, some of it doesn't. You know, even the colour flashing, screen changes colour as you get lower, or the audio gets louder, or something. You know, something that tells the pilots that they're getting below what was agreed as a safe height. I think this just has to be consistent across the board, especially for the pilots who move between different companies and fly for different people. And ultimately what I want is for the pilots to decide that they personally don't want to be down there. Remove that sort of desensitisation that I think is there, and for them to truly want, thinking about it all the time, change management. As soon as something changes, I'm going to get up, sort it, get back down. I think we can push it back a bit the other way, and ultimately it's all about not having another Navajo or another plane go down that we could have avoided by something that's quite easy to implement.